Okay, so today's August the 1st. We're at the home of Randall Kumba, who's letting us interview Jim Jones from GSV. And my name is Cal Goff, and Randall Kumba is also here. And Jim, the first question is very general. It's got a lot of without participle phrases or whatever in it. So I'm gonna ask you the question, and then I'm gonna go back and ask you the first piece of it.
Okay.
You don't have to remember this question. We want to find out about your family background, and by that we mean where you were born, where your grandparents were born, your parents, your sibling story, your partnership history, and then we want to talk about a little bit about your childhood in terms of spirituality and how certain people or experiences were emblematic, you feel, in who the person you are today. So let's go back to the beginning, and you could just tell us about your family. Like, where did your grandparents come from, if you know?
Where they came from, they were always there. We were
Okay.
East Tennessee, long term,
Okay.
and of course, on my father's side, which is the Joneses side, and I think also on my mother's side, which is Mullen's side. I think I haven't had my DNA done, but I'm pretty sure that it's the Irish.
Migration down through the Appalachians or something, that thing.
No, I think it goes
No?
back to well, it wasn't a migration, it was where they brought them all over. They were slaves.
Oh, okay.
And so they intermarried with black people and American Indians and all that stuff, so it's a whole big mix.
Okay.
And the reason I say that, there's a term for it, and grandmother said it one time, what was it, Black Dutch. She said we were Black Dutch and just kind of laughed, and then everybody just ignored her. And Black Dutch was a euphemism for, the colonials that passed us white, but were really mixed race.
Okay.
So, and they were in East Tennessee for a long, long time.
So did you know your both sets of grandparents before they died?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Oh yeah, I used to have to stay with, Mom and Dad liked to camp a lot. So kids kind of interfered with their little program. So they went and took us to our grandparents and went off camping and fishing trips and stuff like that. So, it was fun. I didn't feel bad about it. Although, there were lots of silly things. I remember when I was real little, like maybe 3 or something, Mom said, "Now, we're coming back, right?" It's like, well, it hadn't crossed my mind that they wouldn't be coming back.
Yeah, okay.
It's like, oh, good grief.
So I take it you were around your extended family geographically?
Yes, my mother had
Most of your
10
childhood?
brothers and sisters.
Okay.
And her youngest sister is only 2 years older than me.
Okay.
So, and then her other, her other sisters babysat us as we were growing up from the time we were born. So, Joanne's babysat us when we were babies, and then Virginia babysat us, and then Sue babysat us, and then Janet babysat us.
So who is us? Who are these siblings?
My brother, I only had one. I had a brother.
Oh, okay.
Dave.
Okay. And how much older was he than you?
Well, he was born 9 months after me, which...
Oh, younger than you, okay.
Yeah, he was younger than me. He was also gay, though.
Uh-huh.
And Mom dressed us as twins when we were little because she didn't want to have the discussion about getting pregnant on the weekend she came home from the hospital with me.
Okay.
Which, of course, is very, very hard on a woman's body. And so she, had a lot of complications and had to have surgery and all that stuff.
Okay. All right. So, what do you know about your mom's side of the family? Where did they come from?
Kentucky. They came from Jenkins, Kentucky. Actually, a little place called Beefhide. I had to go, they have all this thing. I had to go I was supposed to go live with my great-grandmother in Beefhide, Kentucky to help her because she was like 90 3 or something. And so to spend the summer. So I went there. It was awful. I had to slop the hogs. I didn't know anything about slopping hogs.
It was more rural than the Tennessee part? Or y'all lived
Oh
in the
yeah,
city?
it was in one of those hollows.
Uh-huh.
Although now, we had electricity. And grandmother had an indoor toilet.
Oh, okay.
But I didn't, so Mom called after the first week to check on me. We had a phone. And so Mom called to check on me, and I said, come and get me now. So I only lasted a week. I wasn't good with slopping hogs.
How old were you?
Who knows? I mean, they would do stuff with me being
Pre-teenager?
little. Yeah, I would say so. Although I did meet one of my cousins who I thought was really cute, and we went down to the creek and, threw rocks at dragonflies and stuff. And I thought, oh, this is not going to be so bad. And then, of course, I never saw him again.
Oh.
In fact, I never saw anybody but my great-grandmother. It's like, well, this isn't what I expected. I was related to everybody in the hollow. It was an Appalachian hollow. They were all Mullenses. And my grandmother's maiden name was a Mullins. She married a Mullins.
Okay.
They were like 6 times removed or something, but still.
So how did you come to leave your family? Where was it, college or before then?
You mean move out of the
Move
house?
out of the
I
house.
never left my family, Cal. This is a Southern family.
I know what you mean. When did your life begin?
Well, when I graduated high school and then I went to college, I went to UT at Knoxville, which is only 80 miles away. Well, I, picked all my stuff up, moved there, and then I had no intention of ever going home. And Mom called me and she said, are you never coming back home? And I went, no. I liked staying out as late as I wanted to and having a drink and all that stuff. But I would take the bus home, more weekends than not.
Yeah. Okay.
It was just crazy.
80 miles.
It's only 80 miles from Knoxville and Kingsport.
Did they ever visit you there?
Well, no, I was in a dorm.
Okay.
They did actually visit. When we got an apartment, they did come down and visit. But let's see, that was when, we had the big coming out thing. Mom read a letter that I wrote my brother, who was living at home because he had mono and had gotten very sick. So I wrote him about breaking up with my first boyfriend, and Mom opened the letter and read it. It was clearly addressed to Dave. And so then she had a hissy fit, and I said, well, it's your own fault for reading somebody else's mail. Don't go off on me. Well, they each called and wanted to come down and take me to lunch and have a conversation. And I said, okay. So I was really touched, actually. My father came down. They didn't say anything about this. Well, Dad didn't say anything about it being sinful or bad or anything. He said, your life you'll be very isolated and very unhappy. And I said, well, that might have been true when you were growing up, but it's not true now. Because I had gotten a house with all these gay friends. We'd had the first gay pride march in Knoxville, and we were having a party every night. It was not going to be isolated, which is a completely different culture in the 70s when people came out. So,
were there conversations about you and your brother both being gay, or did they know he was gay at the time?
he was always very confrontive with them, so they probably did know he was gay. I don't know. He was majored in drama and theater, and so he went to summer stock there at Gatlinburg and spent the whole summer with the crew, and he got, you know, that was back in the
80s.
70s, the early 70s. So they all just slept together. It was like a commune. They just slept together and had sex together, and you know, or whatever.
Okay.
And,
okay. What before we get into your partnership history, how about trying to remember from childhood something that has stuck with you all these years as being kind of a marker of the kind of person you have become. You know, something that
Oh,
you can
okay.
go trace all the way
Well,
back.
of course,
to
I
something
remember
that-
everything, Cal, so I mean, we don't have time
Oh,
to
okay.
start. But one of the key things that I think is so funny, and I do think it is, I think it's key to my personality, was I grew up in the First Christian Church, of course, and the church, grandmother and granddad were two of the signing members, founding that branch of the church.
Mhm.
And, even on this is on the Jones side, the Mullinses were Primitive Baptists.
Mhm.
It's a whole different story. But this were Christians, which is in Church of Christ, except that they have music and pianos and stuff. So I thought I was related to everybody in the church because I just about was. Grandmother's sisters were in our church, and granddad's father remarried, so he had 16 brothers and sisters. I mean, they were like stepfathers. But I didn't draw that line, so I just thought, okay, 16, And they had a quartet where they went around and sang at gospel tent meetings, and we would go, So I grew up in the church, and from day one, and I knew that I was a sunbeam, that I was a good person, that I was good, I was not bad.
Uh-huh.
And so I grew up in this church of brimstone, hellfire and brimstone, and thought, well, none of that applies to me because I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
And I got through that whole thing, all the way through being a teenager, knowing that I was good. And so, of course, I would have never gone down to be baptized because I was good. I was already good. I didn't need to be saved because I was already good. And one of the times we were at one of the tent revivals, when I was little, I looked up and I said, Mom, that man is turning red in the face and spitting, because he was preaching hell's fire and brimstone. Mm-hmm. And she said, honey, we're just here for the music. And so I thought, okay, I could get that.
So, do you consider yourself kind of lucky in that respect?
I'm very lucky, yes, because I never had any guilt about it.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And, I felt perfectly fine. Being gay was an odd thing to me because, before I found out that it was gay, that's what it was being gay.
Yeah.
Because I remember having all these friends, boys and girls, and then when I was about 10, all the boys started clustering together and all the girls started clustering together, and then there was just me. And I go, what is going on? Was there an announcement that I missed? And then, so this is how I became my Enneagram 5 observer, investigator. I was on the outside of both groups, where just the year before, we had all been, a cluster. And so I just said, oh, well, I guess somebody has to be on the outside. I guess it's going to be me. And so they had all these little cliques, even in our neighborhood. The boys had little cliques that I was not a part of. They never, in my neighborhood, in Kingsport, little town, everybody's parents, everybody's grandparents. So there was no bullying in my neighborhood. Now there was bullying outside my neighborhood if you had to leave between neighborhoods. So to go to the market, the Minute Market, to pick up Cokes or candy or stuff, or if Mom sent me to get potatoes or something, you'd have to go out of our neighborhood into another neighborhood. That was bullying, and you'd get beat up and all that stuff. But normally, I was just kind of an outsider who knew everything about them. So they couldn't, couldn't do anything to me.
Let me hark back to one other detail. Do you know how your parents met?
No, I don't exactly. Dad was in college and Mom was in high school. And I asked about that, but I didn't get... No, I asked how Joanne met Bud. That's one of Mom's sisters. Mom doesn't even know that either. It's really odd because she had so many brothers and sisters. Dad had one brother who was younger than him. So they were all in the city high school, in Dobbins Bennett High School. So they were all together. Everybody knew everybody. So So
did your mom and dad go to the same high school? He was just
Yeah,
older?
everybody goes to the same high
Okay.
school. Mhm.
Okay. All right. So I guess there was continual traffic between the people in high school and people who'd gone off to college
Well,
because they were
my
all
two
in the same
grandparents
town.
only lived 2 blocks apart.
Okay. All right.
So, you know, you could go have lunch at either one of their place. And that was just that was only a couple blocks from junior high school. So I actually had lunch at my grandmother Mullins's house most of the time.
Do you know if your parents got married after your mother got out of high school or?
Yeah,
Okay. And did he finish college?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they went and lived in the married couple's place at college.
Okay.
But the thing I don't know the years about this stuff. You know, there's World War II in between all that,
Okay.
or during that time.
Uh-huh.
So I don't. And Dad went to the Italian front. So, and he was colorblind, so he was in the front because he could see through camouflage. So he was in the front lines.
Mm.
He didn't talk very much about it, but he did talk about some of the stuff in Italy because I went to the same places that he had been.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
And that was interesting. But so I don't know how they met exactly, but Kingsport being what it was, one of the guys that I was in school with that later came out and went to UT at Knoxville, that later came out and was a roommate at the big gay house that we were renting. His parents had gone to college with my parents.
Amazing.
So, you know, it's a tight little clique.
I guess so. Okay.
You had to be careful. That's part of the reason I never went back to Kingsport, because I couldn't imagine. I don't think that now looking back, it's like I think all of my friends in high school knew that I was gay, or we didn't have a label back then, but they knew that I was, you know, different, and we were all still friends, so they probably wouldn't have cared anyway. But I could not go back to Kingsport where everybody, you know, and make an announcement that I was gay. So I just never went back to Kingsport.
Okay. So, do you have a set of experiences that you consider your coming out experience, or was it slung out over a decade or something? And I mean, is there such a thing as Jim's coming out
Well,
besides that
I
letter?
suppose, but you know, I was very secretive. I did not have sex with a man other than my brother, of course, which doesn't count because that's just growing up. And he was such an ass, you know, jerk that you know, it's like that didn't last very long. That was only experimental. So I didn't actually come out until college.
Okay.
You know, out to anybody else.
As a freshman or later, or do you remember?
I guess it would have been a sophomore, and that, you know, that's a story because one of the guys that you know, the gay label didn't exist when I was in high school.
Okay.
But, you know, queer, homosexual existed, and the negativity and getting beat up and all that stuff existed. So, but we had, you know, we were very social. I knew everybody in my junior high. In fact, people would come up to me later and go, "You were my best friend in high school." I was like, I have no idea who they are. I just knew everybody's name. I knew everybody's parents. And because I remember, and I made a point of knowing people's names because that was something I was interested in. So, in junior high, I had 2 friends commit suicide, and I'm sure it was because they were gay. And then also in junior high, this guy came up and said, "Do you think it's okay for a man to love another man?" In junior high. And I said, just off the top of my head, I said, "Well, I don't see why not." I said, you know, it's just because my thing was you're loving the person. You're not loving the gender. You're loving the person. I said, "I don't see why not." And, you know, it was later that I realized, oh, he was probably trying to tell me he was gay. Jim is so clueless. And of course, I figured it out because later, you know, a couple of years later, I guess in high school, he was wanting me to come and stay overnight at his house. And I said, "No, I don't think so." I mean, I would really like to, but you have brothers and sisters. I didn't say this, but I thought it. You know, I thought, oh, it would be fun, But Lord have mercy, if anybody ever found out, and they probably would, because he had just as many brothers and sisters as everybody else did.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, no, I'm not going to risk that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you felt safe enough as a sophomore in college to let change?
Oh yeah. Then what happened after high school? Well, so I had 2 friends kill themselves in junior high. Then I had 2 more friends kill themselves in high school. So I thought, best not to let anybody know that you're gay.
Yeah.
And their parents were not accepting, and I knew that my parents wouldn't be accepting because my mom said, this is a horrible thing. She talked about it and said, watch out for men. Don't ever go with a strange man. And
Yeah.
Why would I do that
Yeah.
anyway? But I said, okay, And I was supposed to tell her, and it's like, right, yeah, sure, I'll tell you. But unknown to me, well, this is a side story. Unknown to me, though, I found out many years later, that my brother was walking up to the highway and picking up men when we lived on Jackson Street, which means we were just in junior high or the first year of high school.
Did you regard your brother as a source of information about being gay?
No.
No.
He didn't talk about it.
Oh, okay.
And he fucked girls too. I mean,
Oh,
he'd fuck anything that had a hole in it.
Okay. All right.
He was really wired, and he admits later that he said that was my out of control period. I went, mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But so what happened was I got a letter. I had to work during the summer. Well, when I went to college, my parents paid for the first year, and then they said, this costs too much, you're going to have to pay for it yourself. Oh, okay. So I worked in the summer, and I got a student loan, and I had a scholarship. Little tiny scholarship, $150, big deal, a quarter.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't even cover books, but anyway. So a friend from high school who had been kind of a boy, who was attractive, and he was kind of bisexual too. What we didn't know that was the term back then, but he kind of flirted with boys and girls.
Mm-hmm.
So he wrote me a letter and said that he went to Vanderbilt, that he was taking a summer job up at Cedar Point in Ohio, and why didn't I do that? And I thought, okay, that beats working in the press room, which is where I'd been working with all those tobacco chewing, redneck guys, which was horrible, because they immediately identified me as being gay, being queer, trying to get me to go in the bathroom with them. And my grandfather was the day supervisor of the entire plant, and so somebody whispered in their ear, don't mess with him, his grandfather is the plant manager. And so they left me alone, thank goodness. But so he wrote me a letter. I did apply to Cedar Point and went up there. We were supposed to be roommates, but of course, in his usual jerky way, he got there a week early and they assigned a roommate to him. And I had talked Kevin, whose parents had gone to college with me, who we were, this was before we came out to each other. So we were roommates. Kevin went up to Cedar Point. We were roommates, and then Richard was there in the other hall. Well, they put us in the theater wing, which was, of course, all the gay guys.
Yeah.
Because that was the only room. We fit in perfectly, even though we didn't know anything.
Well, what was the work?
Oh, we ran a little hot dog stand in Cedar Point, and it was off the path. Oh, it was, and because it was a small one, it was just Kevin and me on the day shift, and so we were off the beaten path. Well, we got so bored. We had taken tap together. We started doing tap dances in front of the thing. We got up to $10,000. People started coming and buying our hot dogs and hamburgers, and we were running snow cones. And so, this music major came, and she said, would you give me a snow cone? And she said, I don't have any money, but I could sing an aria for you. I said, okay. Go stand over there and sing an aria. So she sang an aria, and we gave her a snow cone, and then these little kids would come up and, can I have a refill? And I said, sure, I'll give you a refill. I'm going to have to charge a quarter. And so we just ran this little give and take business. we had made more money than the big main line. So they started a manager started coming by on a bicycle to see what was going on. We were running around.
Sounds like a lot more fun than the press room.
It was much fun. It was a lot of fun.
Okay.
Yeah, and so then Richard and I got together in the room with Kevin. We should. Oh, I don't know if we can talk about this.
Sure. You can,
Anyway,
if you want to.
uh,
That was part of your coming out saga.
well, having sex in the bed,
Yeah.
with Kevin next door. I mean, Kevin in the other bed was two beds in a little teeny tiny room, smaller than his living room.
Uh-huh.
And so then, and Kevin raised up, and I looked over. Kevin raised up in bed. And I went, shh. He went back, pretended to be asleep.
So
Don't mess up my date.
So you returned to school that fall more experienced.
Yes.
Okay. And so you were gonna not hide that anymore, or you sort of...
Well, at that time we had been in the dormitories. UT had built this big apartment complex that was linked into like the dormitories, and you had to find 6 people to rent
Oh,
the apartment with you.
yeah.
And this is when there were all the protests going on. So, they used to have the girls' dorms and the boys' dorms separate, and you couldn't intermingle or anything. Well, when it was apartments, what could they do?
Right.
So it just became a free-for-all. I mean, boys and girls were together, and girls were together, and boys were together. And I mean, it's like they just gave up.
Yeah.
There was like no supervision at all in that place.
Mhm.
So I found 6 people that were compatible to me. None of us were out, even though we used to do Diana Ross impersonations with sheets wrapped around us
Oh,
at parties, mixed sex parties.
part of your disguise.
No, we were just having fun, boys having fun.
Okay. Okay.
So then that was...
So you're 20 years old by then, right? Around, or 18 or 19?
20.
Okay.
So now this was before. This was before we did Richard and the summer stock. The summer thing job.
Oh, okay.
It was the next year. This was the year before that.
Okay.
And then he wrote me, and I went and did that. So actually, I'll admit some things. So because I hadn't had an experience with sex, I thought I have to have sex with somebody before I go meet Richard in Cedar Point.
Oh.
So I went downtown and walked all around, all dressed up, in a little college, thing with a sweater, V-neck sweater and my light shirt. I didn't know exactly what I was doing, but so I walked all around at midnight, 1 o'clock, and I finally gave up. I thought, well, actually, I obviously don't have this. So I'm walking back, and I pass the bus station, and this drunk guy comes running out and goes, hey, buddy. And I went, what? And he said, you want to get a hotel room? And I thought, fine. And I said, yes. And so we went, got a hotel room. And so I was taking off my clothes. He said, well, you sure have on a lot of clothes. And then we had sex, and he said something, and I said, oh, no, I've never had sex with anybody, a man before. And he said, well, you sure seem to know a lot about it. And I said, I have a very good imagination. And so then he wanted my number, and I said, no, I don't think that's a good idea. So actually then it turns out that he was a car salesman or something, but all the gay men in Knoxville, of course, knew each other then. So he had my name, so he passed my name to all these people. I found it, all these men. I found it later. I didn't have sex with any of them, but I did get invited to this stag party one time. And what a story. I can't go into all those details. I had a friend that I would meet down at the park and play tennis with. I had no idea that park was a pickup place. So I would be walking back to the house that we had rented with my tennis racket and my little whitey tennis shorts, and these men would be trying to pick me up. I go, no, I live right up here, I'm fine, I don't need a ride. And it turned out that they had my name from that guy who I had just, wanted to get some little experience with, who I never, of course, saw again.
Okay.
But anyway, so then I went back to the apartment, had a shower, and then that was it. I thought, okay, this is, I'm ready. So then we all decided to rent a house off campus and get out of the apartment complex because it was computer generated, and we would get these straight guys, well, we weren't out, so I don't know, we would get inappropriate people staying with us, like an engineer or an ag student or somebody who just didn't fit into our little motel, our Diana Ross routines. Even though we were not out at all to each other. It was such an odd, funny time. Okay. So we got the house together, and then I had told Wally, one of the housemates, about what had happened, about Richard and all this stuff. And so Kevin, who had been my roommate, who I swear raised up in bed, he apparently was in complete denial about that. He was out.
Oh.
I mean, he was having sex with men on campus, but he thought I was straight. I was like, huh. So Wally said, we were all getting the house together, and Kevin said, well, don't tell Jim. Kevin finally told Wally that he was gay, and Kevin said, well, don't tell Jim. And Wally said, well, why not? He's gay too. So we finally had this little discussion among ourselves. We found out that we were all gay. Our Diana Ross routine people. Duh. And we got a house together in Knoxville.
Okay.
And that's when, and so then we became a center point for all of Knoxville. High school students started coming up to our door and knocking. Knoxville people would drive by and point at the house. That's where the gay boys live. And we were in the middle of a neighborhood. It's like it wasn't a through street. They had to come there just to drive around. And of course, we did practice our tap routines out on the wooden porch because you need to do it on wood. It was the only place big enough.
Right. Got to do what you got to do.
Nobody was afraid or scared. There was no
Wonderful.
hatefulness or anything. We were just free spirits. It was part of
like a good time.
Part of the 70s. Yeah.
Okay. Let us change direction here and talk about, we're leading up to the GSV questions.
Okay.
And the way to do that is for you to talk a little more about your spiritual journey, whatever you consider your spiritual journey, before you ever heard about GSV. Just what experiments you tried, or notions you had, or whatever you rejected, any of that.
Well, the Vietnam protests and the hippies and all of that, I was right in with that mindset.
Okay.
And the mindset, which people tend, if you weren't there, they don't quite get, was of reacting against the patriarchy and restrictions, and being yourself, trying to discover who yourself was.
Right.
Was flowering, about flowering. And so we all supported each other. I had women friends and men friends and all that stuff. I never slept with a woman, but everything was very open and above board, and people were just supporting each other for being whoever they were.
Okay.
So I took that, and my brother was gung-ho. He wanted to live in a commune and be completely... he was completely unreasonable. I mean, he didn't think ahead about consequences, so he wanted to just be free. It's like, well, you have to work, you have to have money. Where's food going to come from? Here I am trying to figure stuff out, and he's just being free. So, but we were very, very close, and when I moved to Atlanta, then he moved to Atlanta, and we roomed together, and then we would separate. He would get boyfriends and move out, and then a couple of months later he'd move back in. He'd move out, move in, move out, move in, move out. And my instructions for when I was raising him, I was one, was I needed to take care of my brother, and I took that to heart. So I always took care of him. In fact, when he finally died of AIDS in 1992, I'm sitting in the living room going, wow, what am I going to do now? Because I've spent my whole life worrying about taking care of my brother, and he's not here anymore. And you know, I mean, I would save all my money because I might need to get Dave out of trouble.
Yeah.
So I would have all this money, and I thought, well, I'll buy a house. And anyway.
Okay. So, do you feel like your early religious church going and all was important to you, or not that important, or something that you
Well, the
just wrestled
fact that I
against?
was good, you know,
Yeah.
that I felt all right with God, whatever
Mhm.
God was, and I was never into the guilt trip stuff. I was more exploring who I was and needing to be who I was. And my mother, you know, even though she was raised as Primitive Baptist, she was very artistic, and she took paint lessons, and I helped her study, you know, art. Yeah, I would, you know, ask her. I mean, I would have the books and ask her questions and all that stuff. So, she encouraged us to be creative from when we were little.
Mhm.
I mean, in fact, you know, she wouldn't buy us coloring books because we needed to draw our own coloring books.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
we would need to draw. We wouldn't just fill in the lines. We needed to learn to draw.
Mhm.
And so we had that support for creativity then kind of got spread to creating your life.
Okay.
And my brother and I we would talk deeply about stuff like that.
Did you have other relatives besides your mom who were kind of mentory types for you,
Mm-mm.
or no?
Mm-mm.
Or
No.
teachers in high school who, you know, showed you another path, or that
No,
you're really
not
glad to
really. I
stumble across?
excelled at school, so no,
No. Okay.
not really.
So
I just
you
kinda
don't
made my way.
consider that you had people that you later realized were very instrumental in getting you to where you are. No one in particular.
No, my group was, you know, we had this little group of intellectuals
Mm-hmm.
who everybody was jealous of, although it was more porous than they really. It seemed like I'm sure it appeared like a clique to the inside,
Mhm.
but we had people come and go. You know, we were just kind of thrown together
Mm-hmm.
because we weren't in any of the social groups.
Mm-hmm.
But then it ended up that we actually ran a lot of stuff because we had people in the audiovisual club, we had people in the council, we had
Mhm.
people in the pep club. And so when we finally decided to run somebody for president, we won.
Yeah. Okay.
So that my group was supportive of me in high school,
Uh-huh.
but I didn't have anyone. I had no mentors of anybody. I was always a loner,
Okay.
and I just made my own way. So I guess the only person really would be my brother, because he's the only. He knew me from day one,
Mm-hmm.
and we could be completely open and honest. And he was out and gay,
Mhm.
so we could be completely open and honest with each other. So
Okay.
he was really the one that helped me stay sane, I guess.
Okay. Do you remember any quasi-religious or groups that you got interested in before GSV appeared?
Well, I was a Radical Fairy,
Okay.
and I went to the Radical Fairy
Okay.
conference.
Do you
in
remember
Denver.
how you found out about them?
Yeah, Kevin called me. He was living in San Francisco, and he said, "Let's meet halfway. There's a Radical Fairy conference. I think you'd enjoy it." And I went, "Okay."
And
We have to camp. So I borrowed. Oh, I had a partner then. So he liked to camp. So he loaned me his backpack and all that stuff. And then I went to Radical Fairy, and actually, it had a very bad effect on our relationship because it blew my head open.
Mhm.
And he was a lawyer. He did not want his head blown open.
Okay. Where was this?
In Denver, Colorado.
Okay.
With Harry Hay and
Uh-huh.
James Broughton. I met all those people.
Uh-huh.
I got along good with James, did not get along good with Harry. We kind of were oil and water.
Uh-huh. And
He was bossy.
yes, he was. Do you remember, I mean, I'm right in thinking that was a
And that was a big,
watershed
yeah, it
thing.
was. I mean, it absolutely was. It led me to see another way to live your life, you know, to really, really be open and out and all that stuff. And I met all those people. I loved them. There were like 250 people there. It was
You remember what year that was, or what
in
decade?
1980.
1980.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, I had to look this up because I had to look it up when I was doing that stuff about one of the conferences because the Arizona mud retreat was in 79.
Okay.
So I know that Denver was the next one, so it was in 80.
Okay. So between 80 and 90, when GSV started, did you have contact with that tribe of people somehow?
Yeah,
through
yeah. The
other
Radical
places?
Fairies had potlucks in Atlanta.
Okay.
So yeah, and I knew what was real interesting. Of course, then I reconnected with Franklin, and of course Franklin was there in '80. He did part of the Magic Protection Circle around the whole big fireplace. So he was a guardian, I think. So I didn't see him a lot. I guess he was doing guardian business. I don't know. He probably had a boy or something. But so I reconnected with him through Fairy Circle and John Stowe and then all those people at Atlanta Fairies. I would go to the potlucks there all the way. But I was also working. I had gotten into computer stuff, and IT is a slog. You know, you work 12-hour, 14-hour days. You just don't have a life normally when you get into IT, especially back then. But I was a founding member of the Gay Men's Chorus, the Atlanta Gay Men's Chorus. I was the baritone. And we had some Radical Fairies there. So
You did.
in the chorus, yeah.
Okay.
So I would go, you know, so I would know about the potlucks and I would go to the potlucks and stuff.
Now these potlucks are something I don't remember.
Remember?
They were pre-GSV,
Yeah,
and they were
existential
people who had
church.
been going to things like Running Water and
Yes.
all that. They were
Well,
the Atlanta contingent.
I
of
didn't
the-
hear about Running Water
Okay.
then. I didn't hear about Running Water until I came back from California in 1987. So between 80 and 87, I'm sad that I didn't know about Running Water.
Well, but you were in contact with, you were in Atlanta by then.
Oh yeah, yeah, I was in
the
Atlanta
80s.
from 73.
Okay,
I came to Atlanta in 73.
and so when you're saying potlucks, you're talking about something that I don't remember.
Well, we had food.
Yeah, I know that. But these were like veterans of these other gatherings.
Yeah, I
that
met
happened to
Peter.
be
Peter
living
came
in Atlanta.
down.
Okay, so
Peter Kendall came down from Asheville.
okay, all right. And did you did or didn't go to that thing in '78 at the First E Church, that the Radical Fairy thing
No,
that
I
Franklin orchestrated and Raven and all the kind of
No, see, I never met Raven,
Okay, okay.
which is so odd to me. It's like I had to have met him, you know. But I hung, you know, I really liked this eccentric people. So I hung around with Crazy Al and you know, people like that. I mean, they're drawn to me and I'm drawn to them, and so I just kind of flowed into that area,
Okay.
and I'm not really paying much attention. There was a poet I remember, Mark somebody. I had poetry arguments with him about the use of language, but you know, it was just all so fluid.
Okay, and these were the scattered people who happened to live in Atlanta. You're talking about who had been to various ones of these pre-GSV.
Well, I never
gatherings.
understood how they knew each other, so it probably was Running Water.
Okay.
But somehow I just never. I knew something about Asheville. I knew Peter and Rocco were in Asheville, but I didn't know, you know, what the story was. I never had an invitation. I never knew there was events. And you know, I didn't have a car then, so I might have felt more. I just used mass transit, so I might have felt more unable to go out of the
Sure.
state. I don't
Okay.
know.
Well, do you remember how you did find out about GSV, or How?
Oh, I know exactly.
Okay, let's hear the story.
Well, David died in '92.
Who is David?
My brother.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I was already living down at Tanglewood in Newnan
Oh.
then.
Okay.
So I was, Bo Brownsville, this friend of mine, was in a sex workshop, safe sex workshop, or whatever it was, and Craig Cook was in that too. It was called Slipping and Sliding. I don't remember. I don't remember who hosted that. But anyway,
It was a standalone thing. It wasn't part of GSV.
No, it wasn't part of GSV.
Okay.
No, it was about safe sex
Okay.
through AIDS Atlanta, I think.
Okay.
But and it's like a 6-week program or something. Well, the last week of the program, you're supposed to bring somebody to test, that an oath holder or somebody that will hold you to, these safe sex things. So Bo asked me to go with him. Like anybody could make him do anything he didn't want to do, but I said okay. And I think it's also kind of a pyramid scheme to get the next people in,
Exactly.
But so I was there, and Craig was there,
Uh-huh.
and boy, did I get insight immediately into Craig's character. We had this little game where you had to have something on your back, and you had to read, you had to guess the stuff. He asked me to cheat. I was like, I don't even know you, and I'm not going to cheat.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, during that, he had flyers for the 1994 GSV thing.
Uh-huh.
So I read it. I said, oh, well, this looks interesting. He says, oh, yeah, it's Radical Fairies. I said, Radical Fairies? Sign me up. I'm going to go.
Uh-huh.
I've missed my Radical Fairy contacts.
Okay.
And so I was gung-ho to go.
Okay.
And then Bo had to go. He went too. So we filled up one of the little bunk cabins with all of our friends.
Okay. Who is this Bo person? What's his last name? Or
Bo Braswell.
okay.
Yeah, he's gone now. He's dead. He was such a character.
Okay.
Really, a psychiatric nurse who's a drug abuser.
Okay.
It's like, I'm talking about contradiction.
Had he been to a GSV thing before, or was that his first one as well?
No, I don't think he had been to any of the Radical Fairy stuff. He would just have trailed along with me.
Okay.
He liked new, bizarre experiences.
Okay. Okay, and I have to back up again. We'll
Yeah.
come back to GSV in a second, but how about discussing or describing the lineage of your relationships from whenever you thought the first significant one when it was, and who that was, and how the others happened, and
Well,
where the gaps
Everything
were.
is so inbred,
Yeah, well,
So one of the high school students that came in Knoxville that
Okay.
came to the thing, well, eventually, he grows up.
yeah.
Thank goodness, he was so cute.
Uh-huh.
It was John Weaver, who's the one that wrote the letter for an organized gays against Cobb or something,
Oh,
whatever that
really?
was.
Oh, really?
That was the guy that was my
Really?
first real lover.
Okay.
I was a senior in college, and he was a freshman. And he had been through all of my friends. He finally just got to me, but we kind of stuck. It was like we liked each other a lot.
Okay.
He liked sex, and I liked sex, and we liked to just, it was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
So then I moved, Wally being the asshole that he was, and I forgot that my name was on the contract too. He threw me out of the house. He said he didn't have a room for me in the house, and I'd been there for 2 years, and so I just got my own apartment. I thought, I don't have time for this crap. I'm trying to go to school and work in a job. So I got my own apartment, and then John would come and stay with me. And Wally was mad at me for sleeping with John because John had been Eric's boyfriend, one of the other roommates, but Eric was in Central America with the National Geographic people. His job was to get the snakes out of the boots. And so John was, he was languishing, and And you
And
know, it's
there
that
you were.
thing, you know, it's like, well, if it hadn't been me, it would have been somebody else, you know, he had a roving eye. So anyway, Wally was irritated at me for years about that, and I thought that, Wally, that's just because you wanted in his pants. It wasn't just.
Okay.
So then I had my own apartment, and I wanted John to move in, and he was living at home, and he would not move in, and I probably put too much pressure on him. You know, I mean, he was just a young guy; he wasn't ready to give up all the comforts of home. I guess he was, you know, his parents did not know that he was
he
out.
living in Knoxville?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. He grew up. His family was all in Knoxville.
Okay.
So anyway, he wouldn't move in with me, and I was so tired of going to school, and I was fed up with working the job and all that stuff. So Patty, my real good friend, who I had met, that lives in San Diego, that I'm still connected with. We talk every other month or every month. I had met her at the last peace march again for Vietnam. We got in the car. She was one of the people that we carpooled with to go to D.C. That's where I met her, in the car with 6 other people in this little tiny Corvette. 6 people in a little Corvette driving to D.C. You had to get permission to turn. And it's like, okay, we all have to turn because my arm and leg had gone to sleep, and we would turn, you know. Anyway, I loved her. She was the only one that would go with me to the Washington Monument. And it's like, yes, I know it's 12 o'clock at night, but hell, we're in D.C.
Yeah.
You know, there's a protest. There's thousands of people. I want to go to the damn Washington Monument. She said, okay, I'll go.
Okay.
So we went. We took our sleeping bags and we went. We lay down there, and I mean, it was horrible because they were passing out acid and people were having terrible trips. There were people screaming and having psychiatric breaks and everything. And I said, Patty, I cannot sleep. And she said, I can't either. So we rolled our sleeping bags back up and got the bus and went back to the church. But I just loved her because she was ready to do anything. So now, why was I talking about her?
Somehow she was connected to John. Or
Oh,
John
so
would
she
move
had
in.
moved. She
moved
was a
in.
year ahead of me. So she had graduated and moved to Atlanta.
Oh.
So she called me when I was, I was mad at John for sleeping around anyway. But he wouldn't move. I mean, I was sort of mad at him. I mean, he was so sweet. I couldn't really be mad at him. But she called me and said, I'm looking for a roommate. Why don't you move to Atlanta? I was in spring quarter. Actually, I was in the quarter, halfway through the quarter, but I just thought, I just can't do it anymore. And so I packed everything up and moved to Atlanta without finishing my degree. And so...
And without John.
Well, we're all buddies, so we had a car caravan to move all my stuff down here, and John came too.
Okay.
We had sex on the day, the day before he went back. Even though we were broken up, we had broken up.
Right. So he was the first significant person.
He was.
And then what happened? Was there a gap between him and the next one? Or?
Well, as I said, everything was so inbred. We had met this guy. I had met this guy in Knoxville that I really, 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 really liked. And his partner was sleeping with Eric, who also slept around a lot. So we just exchanged we exchanged sex mates a lot, more than I realized, actually, when I look back on it. So I was really taken with him. His name was Tom Borcher. So so it's Tom and Tommy. So Tom and Tommy broke up, and then Tommy and Eric broke up, and so then Tom and I were just kind of there, hanging out. So I used to follow him around, He was a big Democrat, and he's the one that became a lawyer later when he graduated. So I got on, he was running the bus, he had the bus driver, but he had the speaker. He was running the bus to pick people up to vote. So I went and sat on the bus with him all day long. And that's when he finally realized that I was interested in him. He said, anybody that would sit there must be interested in me, because nobody's going to ride this Democratic voting bus. So he got it.
Yeah.
So then we dated for a while in Knoxville. And then I moved to Atlanta. And then later, Tom moved to Atlanta. And of course, everybody knew Kevin had moved to Atlanta. and Kevin had this kind of open house. The first people that came down from Knoxville always stayed in Kevin's front room while they were getting a job and getting an apartment and everything. So everybody came through Kevin's little boarding house. And so Tom asked Kevin for my address, and Kevin gave it to him, and Tom just shows up on my doorstep. And
And you were glad.
well, it had hurt my, oh, we had had terrible arguments
Oh.
and everything. One time, I had actually gotten a room, was a roommate with him in Knoxville for a brief period. And then he started seeing somebody else. He didn't want to have sex and didn't want to have anything to do with me. And then he was always so dramatic. He invited me out to dinner at a restaurant to tell me that he was moving out. And I couldn't, there's no way I could pay for that apartment myself. So I was being thrown out on the street, basically. And I said, this was after we'd had the meal, and I said, you think I won't cause a scene because we're in a public restaurant? I said, you don't really know me at all. But then I thought, oh well, okay, I'm over it. I'm ready to go. And so we just left. That was at Knoxville. So we left him very bad.
I see.
And then later, he tried to, after he broke up with whoever it was, he wanted to get back together with me. And I went, no, I don't even need to talk to you. I just turned around. John Slack, who lived in the apartment building with me, was, he was pointing out to Tom where I was. And I come walking up the street, and I just turned around, and John said, Jim, you can't do that. I said, the hell I can't. I just turned around and walked the other way. I said, I do not have to talk to
glad
you.
to see him. Okay. All right. So
So that was in Knoxville. So he shows up on my doorstep in Atlanta.
Oh. Okay.
And so I said, okay, come in here. And I was glad to see him there in Atlanta. And I thought, and I did still have that little, charge and everything. So I said, okay, come in here. So I took him in the bedroom. We laid down, and we hugged each other. And I said, okay, what are you here for? Exactly. And he said, well, he wanted to know. I said, are you seeing anybody? He said, no, he'd broken up with somebody. And he was, he was sad. And he just wanted to know if I had any interest. And I said, well, kiss me. And so I said, yeah, I think I do. So we just picked up there after a couple of years gap.
Okay. Interesting.
And we would do that periodically. So then we dated for a while. We were in separate apartments. And then he wanted to get a place together, so we got a place together. And then we lived together as real partners, like married couple, for a couple of years.
Oh, okay.
And then I went to the Radical Fairies thing in Denver, had my head blown open, and I came back and I went, this just doesn't work for me. Although I wanted it to work.
Sure.
I wish that we had gone to couples counseling, which didn't exist back then. But instead, he went to see the guy that he had broken up with in Knoxville, was now living in Washington, D.C. So he went up to Washington, D.C. on vacation. He asked me to go with him, and I said, no, I'm not going up there. Were you to see an ex? And so I didn't go. And while he was there, I just had some kind of thing where I moved out. I called my mother. I said, they came down and met Tom and all this stuff and pretended like it was okay, but they didn't really support the idea. And I said, I have to have some money to get an apartment. I've got to get out of this situation because I was just feeling crazy. And so she sent me money for an apartment deposit, and I moved out while he was on vacation. Oh, and the last thing he said, which I would never have even thought about this, he said, don't move out while I'm gone. And I thought, what a good idea.
Oh my God.
So I moved out. He came back. He was just beside himself. But one of the reasons I wanted to break up was we never could talk. He would not talk about stuff. And it's like I come back from Radical Fairies where you talk about everything. I have to talk.
Yeah.
And so we broke up.
Okay. And then the next person? That was that was early 90s?
No,
Late 80s?
no, that was in 79,
Oh
80s.
my God. Okay, so there's...
We got a
you got
long way
20
to
more
go.
years. 20 more partnership history years.
No, I never had a lot of partners.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't do
Well, that's
I didn't do
fine.
casual sex either. I did well actually, I mean I had when it felt right I had casual sex, but I didn't feel driven to have
Mhm.
casual sex. And I usually had sex with friends,
Mhm.
to be honest.
Okay.
Not at my instigation. They would, like Dale, who was Kevin's roommate there over on whatever it was in Midtown. He came over one time, he was really sad, and he gave me this whole sob story about how his partner in high school had committed suicide, and this was the day. And it's like, it was a whole big story just to have sex. I thought, you jerk. But I said, oh, Dale, I'm so sorry, a couple of my friends committed suicide, so I said, come in, let's have some tea, and da-da-da-da-da. And then finally it occurred to me, he just wants to have sex. And I said, did you want to have sex? And he said, yes. And I said, okay, let's just have sex. Why do we don't have to have all this rigmarole?
Gosh.
So we had sex, and, he said, now I don't do this and I don't do that. And I thought, okay, this is not going to be a long-term, a reoccurring event.
Yeah. Gosh. So what happened?
So then
Go.
Tom, we broke up with Tom,
Yeah.
and then I was living in that little apartment, and I had a little dog, and I thought, I don't want to. We had been living next to the park. I had always lived next to Piedmont Park. Always lived. I loved being there and having that green space and everything. And then the arts festivals and all that stuff, and the free concerts and the symphony and all that stuff. So I decided that I wasn't going to give up. Wasn't going to give up the park because of Tom.
Yeah.
So I knew the rental agency people and actually had a really good relationship with the man's wife who run the front desk because I exchanged pumpkin pie recipes with her. So I just went in and I said, can you, get me in? So I got into one of those brownstones that had a 200-person waiting list. The brownstone right there against the park. So I moved back into Efficiency Apartment, and Tom's living in the building in front. So we started walking our dogs together and all that stuff. And he was still dating somebody else. Then he eventually moved to California, and this was 81. So and I joined the chorus.
Okay.
And so then two of those guys, we decided to get an apartment together. So we went to 5th Street, got the house on 5th Street, which became the chorus house. And we would cook and have all this wonderful time and play cards and all that stuff, but I never really dated anybody. I had sex with a couple of people, but there's nothing,
Okay.
recurring. Really, let's see, and then, AIDS was bad, all the people died, and I was beginning to have like panic attacks and quit going out to the bars and all that stuff, and I knew that, so we broke up, and the house broke up, and I moved to 6th Street, roomed briefly with Jim Braden, who at that time, he was still working on his master's and he didn't have any money, but he was very irresponsible, and I threw him out, finally.
I didn't know
Oh yeah, I used to date Jim Braden.
that. Really?
He had sex with everybody in the chorus, I think. My number came up, and I said, oh, good, okay. So, yeah. So, the amount of, it's like, you look back and it's like, oh gosh, I've had sex with a lot of people in this room over a 30-year period, we don't, we just don't think about it or talk about
True.
it.
Okay.
But, so then he moved out, and I worked all the time. I worked 14-hour days. My IT career. Was I seeing anybody? No, not really.
Okay.
And then Patty had moved to San Diego, and I would go out and visit. I would spend my vacations out in San Diego with her. I would go out 2 or 3. I was out 2 or 3 times, 4 or 5 times even. And then she called and found out she had Epstein-Barr, which at the time was seen as a precursor to AIDS. and of course she had lots of sex. Patty had lots and lots of sex with all kinds of people. So, I mean, gay men too. She's a very exciting person to be around. My brother had sex with her. Patty asked me years later. This was when I had first moved down here in '71. I had temporarily flirted with living in Atlanta, and my brother came down and stayed, and they had sex together. And she said, "Did you know we had sex?" I said, "Patty, the neighbors knew you had sex." I just put a pillow over my head and went, "Have a good time, children." So anyway, so Patty called me. She thought she was dying. I was tired of my job at Norrell, and so I quit my job at Norrell and moved to San Diego to take care of Patty. Even though she had a live-in boyfriend who wasn't taking care of her. But she, you know, we just knew each other really well, and I could jog her out of her depression and whatever. And I thought she was dying too, and I'd had so many friends die, so I thought, okay, well, I'll just live there and, you know, and get an IT job. So I did, and I lived with them for a while, and I would cook meals and wash dishes and make her get up. And I think I don't know if she was on disability or what, but she wasn't working. And she met us, you know, met my movie van and everything, met us, and she had not had a bath in a week and was wearing the same sweatsuit. And I said, okay, well, you know, you need to go take a shower, change clothes. And so I would get her up, we would go walk around the block, we would have tea, I would cook meals, and then she eventually got better. And then I don't know why, I just felt like I needed my own place for her and her boyfriend living there. Not that they wanted me to move, but I just wanted my own place. So I got my own place in San Diego and worked there for a while. And then Dave called, and he had been diagnosed with AIDS. And he had been evicted and was living under a bridge. And I said, I don't think so. So I called some people who let them stay in his basement, their basement temporarily. And then I flew back and checked things out. And I thought, well, this is terrible. So I moved back to Atlanta, rented a house, and moved Dave in. And, you know. So I didn't have time for boyfriend. It wasn't even on my mind to think about boyfriends then. And then he died, and I moved to Noonan. Found the property and moved to Noonan. So I didn't have a really a partner boyfriend until Ted, actually, Gulick.
And that was after GSV? You met him there?
I met him at GSV. Who knew? I didn't know he had slept with so many people. He had lots of sex also. So he and Craig had been hanging out together. Craig was over him, and Craig and I had a cabin together. So Ted was there waiting to talk to Craig. Craig didn't want to talk to him, so he wouldn't go out and talk to him. So I went out and talked to him, and I thought, oh, I like him.
Yeah. Okay.
So then I said, well, I'd like to see more of you. And he said, well, good, I'd like to see more of you. So when we got back to Atlanta, he called. And he was living in Atlanta then. And so he came down, and we had dinner and sex and a massage. And I said, this is nice. He said, I think so too. So then we went to his place and had dinner and sex and a massage. I think this is working out good. And so then we would just go back and forth. Always. Oh, this is public, isn't it? Yeah. Well, I was going to say always lots of sex is what I was going to say, since this is somebody you know.
Well, as we get closer to the present, you can.
So this was 1989.
Generalize more if you wish.
Yeah. Oh, I don't care.
Okay. Yeah.
This was 1989. Well, and really, I mean, Ted talked about our relationship in one of the small groups, and the people from the small group came to me at conference and went, wow, I feel like I know you a lot better. And I went, oh, great. He told you my name?
Well.
Oh, well. It's the truth,
That's right.
And it wasn't negative, so.
Okay. Well, we've asked everybody this question because so many people end up at GSV from so many different patterns, and this is different than a lot of people.
Probably.
So, that's good. Okay, any more?
Well, I wasn't uncomfortable because I came from a radical fairy tradition. So I was not ever uncomfortable. You know, it didn't bother me to see people wearing sarongs or,
Yeah.
you know, it's like, no, I love it, or makeup or anything. It's like, no, that's what I'm here for.
Okay.
I mean, the fact that I didn't do it was not relevant to me.
So when you got up to the first GSV conference, there weren't anxieties like a lot of these people
I
had.
clicked. Yeah, I was at
Okay.
home.
Okay. Okay, so the Radical Fairy thing was the entree into the GSV world, and so it was not that a transition at all, really. It was just more
No,
of
it
the same.
wasn't. It was just like finding home, finding a
Okay.
place again.
All right. Do you remember anything about that first conference in particular, or
remember
do they all
everything
run
about
together? Huh?
No, I remember everything about it.
Well, okay, you can isolate the first conference. Well, good.
Yeah.
All right.
That
What
was
was that like?
That was the singer from Canada.
Okay.
And so I'm a little confused because for some reason we met in the lodge. So all the people crammed into the lodge. And of course it was, we didn't get up into the hundreds back then.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a lot of people for the lodge. It was standing room only. So you spent a lot of time standing. It's like, good grief. I
This
can't
is
stand this.
94.
Yeah, 94.
Okay.
But he gave the concert. That
Is
was
this
really
David
fun.
Sarada?
Uh-huh,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Powerful Love.
Okay. So you remember that?
And then Duncan sang, and then we had the Duchess did the talent show, which was, and I was actually offended. He did he wore the dress that was like Jackie Onassis dress with a knife in it and blood all down it. It's like, that's not funny.
Mm-hmm.
But, you have to just... And then we had the guy play the piano who had just learned, and he played Twinkle Twinkle Little Star or something, and messed it up and started over 5 times. And it's like, oh God, this is so painful. But, it was a lesson in, patience and loving kindness. And then everybody stood up and applauded him. And
Yeah.
it's like, wow. It's like, wow. It was just the love of the group and the supportiveness of the group to every single person there, to just be whoever they were, and the fact that you're in this huge crowd of gay men, which you never really are.
Yeah.
So it was a very affirming experience. But I mean, it really reached into your core. So when I came back, I cried for 3 days, and I had to call into work crying and say, I can't come to work today. And then the next day, I was still crying. I said, I can't come to work today either. And I thought, oh, this is not good. I need to do something. And so I called Gary Kaufman, and he said, we're getting together at Piedmont Park, some of us, why don't you come in? I said, okay, good. So I went in, and it calmed me down. I thought, oh, it isn't over.
Yeah.
These people are right here in Atlanta. I was crying because the conference was over and that was gone. And it's like, it's not gone. You take it with you.
Yeah.
And from there, then I was okay. And I could go back to work.
Oh, that's a sweet story. Oh. So, hence the importance of warning people that this might happen to them when they...
Especially people that are their first time.
Yeah. What was there anything you remember about that first conference that was new, or
The drumming.
that was not?
I had never drummed before,
okay.
and of course I drummed, and that it turned. I thought, who was the guy? Was so hateful to me. I wasn't in rhythm or something, and he was like really, really hateful. And I thought, well, this isn't very fairy.
Yeah.
So I just stopped drumming. Then I finally went to my cabin. I thought, well, I can't just stand here and not drum. And so I finally went to my cabin. Well, the drumming that year went to 4 o'clock in the morning, which we don't do, of course, anymore because nobody can sleep.
Oh, right. But I didn't know that was a problem for the drummers. I thought they...
No, they cut us off. I mean, we agreed to stop.
Okay.
Anyway, I found out. In fact, I looked up later. This guy was running. It was probably the guy that was running the workshop. There was a drumming workshop, and he had brought all those big drums and everything. So it's like, oh well, he probably wasn't really GSV anyway.
Okay. So And the reason you didn't meet Raven is because he died in 93,
93.
and you went to the conference in 94.
And then we had that big, long, all the grief outpouring for somebody that didn't even know.
Yeah.
Although it did trigger stuff with HIV for
Uh-huh.
me.
Uh-huh.
I know he died from a knife wound,
Yeah.
but, I grieved along with the best of them.
Okay. Well. And so, is that when you said you had met Peter and
Yeah.
before?
And he
the
remembered
conference?
me. I was
Oh,
touched.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, we had done a circle dance thing, and I had the hots for him. I thought he was really nice looking.
Mhm.
And so we were and it was really a mystery to me. I mean, it always happens. So we're doing all these circles, and we break into smaller circles, and then the dance ends with Peter and I facing each other. Well,
Nice.
the group could not let that happen because Rocco wasn't there, and they were protecting Peter. So they immediately came and separated us.
Oh.
Pearl from Short Mountain was there, and John Stowe was there, and so these people just grabbed me and pulled me away from Peter. So we had this little kiss, and then whoop, okay, we get jerked apart. I went, okay, I guess he's not available. Oh, so that was a funny thing. But he did remember me after all those years.
Yeah, well.
I thought, there was something magical about it. I thought, well, we were meant to be together. It's like, anyway, I was touched that he remembered me. I certainly remembered him.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, anything else about that first conference you want to record as having happened for you?
No, not really.
We
No.
we are now down to half. We've gotten through half of these.
Oh, wow, okay.
Do you want to quit for a while?
No, I'm fine.
You're fine.
You know.
Okay. Randall, how you doing?
Good. We have to
Okay.
stop at 1 because Tony's going to be here.
Oh, well, aren't we going to eat first?
No, it's 12:30 now.
We can't eat before.
What's Tony doing? Oh, is Tony going to do a thing?
He's
An
Let's just-
interview?
No.
keep this on.
Okay, well, all right. Okay, so now we can move
We're on a
in.
roll.
Well, we can move into conference memories in general. Like, it doesn't matter which ones
Oh, okay.
they're from, but just things that stand out in particular for you as you're really glad they happened, whatever those were.
Well, I've had mystical and magical things happen. to
Really?
me.
Such a
Yeah.
really? Okay.
Well, I got my, everybody wants their
Your name.
spirit animal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I went through the name. I thought, I'm not having somebody else give me a name. I'll get my own name.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just came up with Moondragon,
Mhm.
and the X got in it because Moondragon was already taken when I was getting my my whatever it was,
Mhm.
log on.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody in Australia has it. They've actually emailed me.
Oh.
But I said, well, I guess we're a member of the same tribe. So anyway, I became Moondragon for the dragonflies. But I had a big experience. It was when Stephen Bann was a small group leader. So I don't know what year it was. But we're having a small group, and it's kind of okay. Steve Berman was in it. John Whidden was in it, and then these people that never came back were in it. I don't know their name. I didn't know their names. Yeah, it takes a couple of years, to actually remember people's names really good.
Yeah.
So we're sitting in the lower treehouse on the sofas, in a circle, and you have those awful neon fluorescent lights
Mhm.
on.
Mhm.
Well, all of a sudden, I hear this screaming, this high-pitched screaming, and everybody just keeps talking. And then I hear this banging and screaming at the same time, and I look over at the fluorescent lights, and one of the humongous dragonflies. Have you ever seen the dragonflies that are that big, that long,
No.
with wings that big?
No.
Well, there is a species, I see them every now and then,
Mhm.
was hitting the lights. And I heard the screaming in my ears.
Mhm.
And so I got up, everybody's still talking. I got up, I went over there. I tried to shoo him down with a piece of cardboard. It didn't work. So I turned off the lights. John Wooden had a art display there. I took one of the pictures and kind of knocked him down, and then he flew over. Oh, and I opened the door. Well, he flew over to the window. He didn't go to the door. The whole group is still just talking like nothing had happened. Here I am doing all this dance, trying to get this dragonfly out. Nobody's helping me. So I go over, he's on the door, and I hold up my finger, and I said, I'll help you if you let me. And he cocked his head like that, and then he jumped onto my finger. So I thought, ooh, this is going to hurt. And it did. Their claws, they start going into your skin. And I thought, okay, I'll put up with this. And so I take him to the door, and he won't let go. And I go, no, come on. So I went out the porch there that goes down to the fireplace, and I finally took my arm and went like that. And then he flew off. He flew around a minute and then flew off into the sky. Then I come back in. I sat down in the group. Nobody says a single word. We continue to have the group. Well, to me, it was a very big experience. And I decided that dragonflies were my spirit animal.
Okay.
So then when I get back to to Noonan, and my garden, there are dragonflies everywhere. I mean, like 6 or 7 or 8 in my garden. And I go out to water, one of them flies around and around and around and around me, and then lands on my chest. Lands on me. And it's just sitting there. And it's like, it's still prickly. And I went, oh no, this kind of hurts. So I took him on my finger and put him on my shoulder, and he sat on my shoulder while I went around and watered on the flowers.
That's amazing.
And I thought, well, there is something going on. You know, I don't know what. But from then on, I just accepted dragonflies as my guide and guides.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you remember any keynotes in particular who you thought were better than others, or they all
We've
kind of
had
mushed
some
together?
wonderful ones. You know,
I mean, you meant something more to you than others.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, I had experience with them. You know, gosh, now see, it's hard to remember some of their names. Who's the one that did the first breath work? It's not Andrew. Oh well, I could look it up. Anyway, when we did that, the whole group did the thing of envisioning and pulling up the energy, and then sending it around the circle, and then sending it out to the world. I mean, I felt it leave. It was very strong energetically. And he remembers me also. I met him somewhere else, and he said, oh yeah. And I always assume people won't remember me. And I said, oh, hi, I'm Jim Jones. You know, I was one of the organizers of the conference. He said, Jim, I know you. He gave me a big hug. I went, oh, well, that's nice.
This is not the guy in Atlanta who does the breath work stuff.
No, it's the big famous person.
Okay.
Oh shoot, this isn't complete.
Well, that's okay.
I might remember him later.
Okay.
So that was a big experience.
Okay.
Gosh, I need to have the list of them so I could look over it. I went to every conference from 1998 until 2014. Every conference there was. Occasionally I would miss a spring or miss a winter, but I went to every fall conference there.
Do you remember ever almost not going because you were,
No, I always wanted to go. Until lately.
Okay.
And now, the
What happened
structures.
between 94 and 98? What?
You know,
You remember?
I just, for some reason, I was offended. From the mailer, I just got an attitude. It was taking it into the world, and I thought, nobody's going to tell me what I was going to do. I just felt it was preachy. And I thought, I'm not. Well, now I had a good reason. 95, I got laid off from work in 94. So I went to the conference without a job in 94, my first one. So then I found a job in I didn't find a job until September '95. So I didn't have the resources to go to a conference in '95. I couldn't get off work anyway. I had just started work at a new company, and that company is so archaic, a Fortune 500 company that doesn't give them. Your first year, you don't get a vacation at all.
Right.
That's just stupid. And they've changed that policy since then. But anyway, so I didn't go in '95, and then something offended me in '96 about taking your message into the world or something. I felt it was preachy, so I didn't go. And then I don't know why I didn't go in '97, you know. And then for some reason, '98 was the year. You know, I thought, what am I thinking? You know, I need to go to this. And of course, I had money. By then, I had been in the system. I had a good income. I had 2 weeks vacation. It's like, you know, this is a no-brainer to go to GSV. And then I went, and I think it was '98 or '99, we had a small group where the council were secretly, you know, trying to pull people in. So we had a ritual to make a commitment to GSV. I thought, wow, that's a little,
Coercive.
yeah, a little forceful.
Yeah.
I mean, we had an anointing
Yeah.
and a vow
Uh-huh.
that we would do something. Well, you know, for me, those vows kind of kick in. So, and Chase was in my small group that year. So we both joined the council that year.
Okay.
And, you know, and then I was on the inside from there on out for years.
And was it initially real satisfying and energy giving, and did you like that? Did
No,
you
it was awful.
It was awful from the beginning?
Council work was hard,
Uh-huh.
you know, because there's so much contention and we had so many strong voices. Now, I have to say that, you know, Martin was leading the group, which he led for like 10 years or something, a very, very long time anyway. And I really admired his skill, so I would like watch him, you know, so there were things, dynamics that I liked. And of course, I liked King. Well, the first couple of years, the council met, but, you know, they really, 2 or 3 people kind of planned things out in advance, and then we just, we just okayed it. And then we would do the groundwork, but the initial creative thing was not really happening in the council. But it was so beautiful that it was mostly through King. King really created a lot of stuff, or pulled it, or pushed it forward, or
Really?
something.
Okay, didn't know that.
Yeah,
Didn't know.
yeah.
Okay.
I see it as being mostly King.
Uh-huh. Huh.
But Martin then would have, and then we would have visionings and all that stuff, which really was such a joke, because we'd get together, do trances. We would actually do the shamanic body trances,
Yeah.
and then come through. Well, that doesn't work. You know, they're individual.
Oh.
You can't do a group work from a trance. So everybody would talk about what they did. None of it fit together. So then we would have to like ignore it and do something else.
Oh,
It's like,
no.
oh, this is crazy. Year after year after year, we would do that. But it's like, oh, these people are crazy.
So, is it fair to say that despite the tensions or the contentions and the strong personalities and all that, it was sort of worth staying on the council?
It's a different level of experience.
Uh-huh.
You know, I mean, it really changes your perception of the conference. And then, of course, if you're on the council, you have a lot of responsibility at the conference for getting things done. And, you know, I became an elder, so if you're one of the elders, then you have to do, if there's any problem at all at the conference, you have to be one of the people that solve it. So that takes, you know, it's a very different way of experiencing the conference. Now, back then, you had the council who did the administrative work, and then we also formed a planning committee. So the council met every month, the planning committee met every month. Almost all the people were in both groups. So we're meeting
Twice.
2 to 3 times a month. That was just too much work.
Yeah.
But the reason it's worthwhile was that back then, we didn't do any of this majority rules thing. And we didn't actually do full consensus vote either. We just talked ourselves to death. And if you know, if people could be honest about what their concerns were, if we couldn't get a resolution, we would just table it until the next meeting because we'd have it next week anyway. And finally, what happened was we would get a higher level solution so that both concerns were met, but it would be in some wonderfully creative way that was completely outside the box. And to see that kind of thing happening was what made it worthwhile to attend. And of course I loved those guys anyway, and we would start our council meetings with the heart circle. So, you know, it was kind of a GSV more intensive experience. But I mean, it was exhausting also.
Can you give some examples of some of the earlier controversies? You know, like what were the issues that people couldn't seem to agree on at first?
Well, in the early years, there was all that tug to be a body electric place.
Okay.
And leather and S&M and, you know, all sexual crap. And, you know, I mean, and we did have workshops in that, but...
you felt like there were people trying to push the organization in particular
to be a body electric experience.
Okay.
There really was. But it kind of, you know, teeter-tottered on the, you know, for a while, but then it came into its own, you know. And then George became our mentor for intimate touch and, you know, went through all that. And then he just, you know, it all eased off. And those people, I mean, the people that really wanted to be something else went somewhere else, I guess. I don't know. I mean, we had people that really wanted it to be, to focus on leather, or focus on S&M, or focus, you know, they wanted to focus on that. And it's like, well, that's not the focus.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not saying it's bad, it's just not the focus, you know. Somehow it righted itself. I don't know. That was one controversy. What was another?
How about some of the financial, how that was handled?
Well, you know, that was kind of a mystery. Bruce did everything. Until Bruce let it go, nobody really knew financial stuff. You know, we spent money. I mean, they didn't even keep a checking. You know, they had a checkbook. Bruce kept the checkbook. You know, I think we did have to have 2 counter signatures on the checks.
Do you think
there was never any dishonesty, and everybody was very trustworthy. I mean, nobody was trying to. Money became an issue once we started accumulating money. We got up to $36,000 one time. Then people get crazy. You know, it's real funny how money warps people.
Okay, that's interesting.
So it was best to just get rid of it. So, you know, it's gone. We don't have money anymore.
Was the idea about needing more organization for legal or other reasons an early thing, or did that come pretty late, as you remember? You know, this whole fossilization, bureaucratization, organizational, structural...
Oh, that was later.
Was that
you know, the
much
very
later?
first, you know, what you require, you know, Pat's thing was just not true. He made up a whole bunch of crap, because I was on the council and I remember, and he snows people by telling them the story of stuff that's just not true.
Okay.
Because Pat wasn't there anyway, so he made stuff up about how we needed structure. So when they first got incorporated, I can't find a copy of the ferry bylaws. They were so funny. It's like half a page, and it just is so fluid. It says, well, we'll do this and we'll do that as the Spirit moves us.
Right.
And the state of Georgia accepted that as their bylaws. It's completely open. There's hardly any structure at all. So it isn't the state that's making us have structure.
Yeah, it's
the people that want to control things.
okay. Were there controversies about, not controversies, but was there scary level of disagreement about who to invite or what kind of themes, or did those? Do you feel like that was kind of a
We didn't
natural?
have that much of a pull. I mean, mostly Mostly everything just flowed.
Okay.
I mean, the early years, I don't remember a lot of disagreements about anything.
Okay, that's what I wanted to get at.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was really pretty smooth. I mean, we had issues. I mean, we had things we had to figure out how to deal with,
Mhm.
which was people passing out meth on the dance floor. You know, we had to figure out what's our policy, how are we going to do it, and who's going to look out for the, who's going to do that.
Mhm.
And we developed a strategy and implemented it and pulled those people aside and said, that's when we added little tweaks. That's when we added, please leave drug and alcohol at home.
Mhm.
Please, because you're really fucking us up.
Mhm. Right. I remember when we had to say that.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Okay.
And it was mostly, to be honest, people from Short Mountain, because they just, they think they have a right to do their drugs and they're going to do them wherever they are. And it's
Yeah.
like,
About the small groups, do they all kind of mush together for you, or are there?
No, I remember
Were
each
there-
individual small group.
Okay.
I don't know that I remember every one of them.
Well, would you agree that that is one of the things that makes the magic happen? Is that?
It is absolutely is.
Okay.
And that comes through on every conference. I mean, when we get the remarks about the conference, that's always where stuff happens and where people have the most worth to it. They really, really value it. I mean, there was a push at one time. David wanted to do away with small groups, and it's like
David who?
Salyer,
Okay.
and we said, no, absolutely not.
I can't.
I don't even remember why.
Okay.
He just wanted to do something different.
Okay.
Well, let's just do something different. I don't think so. Let's not ruin the critical part of the conference.
Okay. So you were a part of at least 11 or more small groups. How can they not run together for you?
Well, I don't remember all of them, but I probably could sit down and eventually figure them out.
Uh-huh.
Well, the thing is, I make connections with those people that are still alive today from people that were in my small group. Les Jeter was in the one where we were Red Coyotes, which was where I met Chase. He was in my group, and that was 1998, was when I met Chase. And it's like, and Les Jeter lives in Houston, or Dallas. He lives in Dallas, sorry. He still emails me. It was a very significant thing. He was a cancer survivor. We hit it off. He sang. He was a pianist and a choir leader at a church. So we went over to the lodge and got together some people that sang, and we sang hymns. Well, boy, those people had a fit that we were singing hymns. And we went, honey, just get over yourself. We're not anti-Christian, are we? It says all spiritual paths, right? I said, well, just listen to the music. Try not to focus on the words. Honestly. Dandy was Dandelion, he really was offended. I said, well, if you're offended, why don't you go to the other building?
Yeah, right. There are solutions to this problem.
Because we're not stopping. I was pretty, I can express myself pretty clearly, even.
What were some of the problems that came up that you felt responsible for helping solve in the conferences? Some of the, besides the
ones I
thing.
didn't want to be responsible for.
Well, just things that came across your path.
Somebody giving a blowjob in the non-sexual massage on Thursday night. It's
Okay.
like, come on.
All right.
And we had to, it's like they came and wrote me, and I wasn't there. They came, we need another elder. We've got to have 3. They wrote me in. We had to go talk to this guy. And he said, well, I don't know what to say. And George says, how about I'm sorry and I won't do it again? And I went, yeah, that works for me. God.
Okay.
These people.
they're-
It's like they're, I think that's something that we don't really address in GSV is the sex addicts, the people who cannot control themselves. We work on being more free sexually and more expression, and of course respecting where we are with the campground and everything. It's like, no, you can't have sex on top of the fire tower. I mean, I've had to, talk to people about that,
Uh-huh.
you know.
Yeah.
And people do go have sex in the woods. Did you know that?
Well,
Assume they're there, right? The woods are there. I was like, I would not go down to that lake in the dark. You're crazy. But anyway, whatever.
Okay, so there's the sex
That's the
issues.
and then we
how
had
about nudity? Was there ever any
nudity. Yeah, there was a
there-
big thing. We had some nudists who just could not accept the fact that North Carolina will not let you be nude in a cafeteria.
Okay.
And actually, they didn't come back. They came for years,
Uh-huh.
and then one year it was just too much. They insisted that their rights were to be nude in the cafeteria. I went, no, I don't think so.
Okay.
So Naked Tommy never comes back anymore.
Okay. Let's see what other things.
At one time, of
Had to
course,
be
we had
said.
we always put we always put the sheets around the windows when we have the nude massage.
Mhm.
One year they forgot to do that. And anybody walking down the road just sees this men, 40 men having a naked massage. And of course it's non-sexual, but it kind of that pushes the boundary of the
Yeah.
UUA campground.
Okay. Tell the story about the power going out, or the lightning or whatever.
From
Tornado or
Hurricane
something.
Ivan.
Yeah, what was that?
Oh, that was awful.
It was a fall conference or winter?
Yeah, it was a fall conference, and I was on the council. People called and said, "Are you still having the conference?" And we went, "Well, of course we're having the conference." We didn't think a hurricane would be that strong in North Carolina. We knew Atlanta was at risk, but we didn't think North Carolina was at risk.
Uh-huh.
And so we get up there, it washed out the road, 2 lanes fell off the mountain.
Oh, my.
We're trapped up there. The mountain staff had completely left us. And of course, they were panicking about their families and all that stuff.
Uh-huh.
2 of the mountain staff died in the mudslides that night.
Oh,
We found out the next day. So we're there. You call the emergency numbers that Julie always says to call. There's no answer because there's nobody there. So the power goes off. There is a foot of water coming down the driveway into the bottom of the treehouse. In waves, in a foot. So the men took all the furniture, stacked it all on top of each other. They took the grand piano out of the lodge. Oh, the roof blew off of the great room of the lodge. So they took the pictures off the wall. They moved the grand piano under a roof. And
This sounds like you would have to devote all of the time. There wouldn't be a conference if you were doing all this.
this all happened one night.
Oh, okay.
The wind came up and blew the roof off.
In the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, we have 100, back then we'd have like 120 people.
Mhm.
So each place just addressed the issue, the problem,
Mm-hmm.
and we took care of their infrastructure for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, there was no power the next morning. Oh, so I'm walking back. I think, with a foot of water coming in, they're trying to sweep a foot of water away with a broom. I'm out of here. This is not possible to do. I said, you need cinder block or something. Block the water from the driveway from coming down that slope.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I thought, okay, our little cabin said, okay, we're going back to the cabin. Well, the lights are out. There's no power. They run off. I don't have a flashlight. And they all will run off. What? And all of a sudden, I'm standing in the dark. And so every time there was a lightning flash, I took a step and went as far as I could. It took me 2 hours to get to the cabin. And I thought I had gone off the road because I started walking into shrubbery and trees. And I looked down. I was on the road. The trees had fallen across the road. So I had to climb over trees. I got to the cabin finally. I said, thanks for waiting on me, guys. We go there. The wind is so strong, it's blown all the rocking chairs down to the end of the porch. So we all decide, well, we're going to try to sleep. I was in cabin 2, and Craig was my roommate. Hunter and his partner were in cabin 1, and I don't know who else, Tony maybe, James. And so the wind is coming, that's when it turned around. So it went up, and then it turned around and came back. Oh, an interesting thing. We had the meeting, and Bernard Morin
Mm-hmm.
said, we were talking about doing magic, and he said, well, there's no way that you could divert a hurricane. And I thought, well, I wonder why not. And so I went and did a ritual with the mountain myself. And I asked the mountain to anchor. And I said, we need to turn the hurricane. Well, the hurricane, it didn't help. It was a wrong thing to do, but the hurricane actually turned around that night after I did that ritual.
Mm-hmm.
It hadn't happened in 150 years. I mean, it can happen,
Mm-hmm.
but it hadn't happened in 150 years. And so I thought, oh well, I really am sorry about that, because it just gave us twice as much rain. Bad idea. But anyway, the wind was so strong that the windows were closed and the rain was coming horizontally through the cracks around the frame of the windows. So all of our clothes got wet, the carpets got wet, the beds got wet, and we're just laying in bed anyway, having the wind hit the thing. So I get up the next day and look out the window. The roof of cabin 1 is gone. So we go, oh my God! We go running down there. We're banging on the door, banging on the door. There's not a sound. And so we're banging and we're yelling and we're screaming. And they finally, what? They get up and go, what is your problem? And we said, there's no roof. Well, it was still insulated, so they didn't know they didn't have a roof.
Gosh.
I thought, how could they be that asleep? I don't know. But anyway.
Wow. Did the mountain have insurance for the repair?
Oh, I bet they did. Those workers came in. They fixed the roof that day.
Mhm.
They came in. They kept lumber and stuff.
Oh. Okay.
So they came and hammered. I don't know what they did about the lodge, but they got cabin 1 fixed that day.
Mhm.
Then we go to breakfast, and there's no staff. There's no mountain staff.
Mhm.
Julia comes up. Of course, she's so responsible.
Oh.
So I don't know how she got up the road, but anyway, so Julia's there, and we go back in the kitchen, light candles, and cook our own breakfast.
Mhm.
And what's his name? David Michael Searcy.
Mhm.
He's there. He's our, he's a concierge.
Okay.
So he just took charge. He got, and we had pancakes and scrambled eggs, and we had one generator running there. So we had one light bulb in the kitchen. And it's a beautiful picture. There's pictures of the dining room with the candles lit, and that's breakfast, where we had breakfast that day.
Wow.
It was wild. We coped.
Uh-huh. Was there anything comparable like that happened at any other
No,
conference? Any kind of...
I don't remember anything
No.
ever happened like that.
Okay. Wow.
I mean, the roads, it took them, we had to go through Highlands and around down to 20. You couldn't get through Dillard.
Okay.
I mean, you couldn't get to Dillard.
I wonder what year that was. I have to look up,
Uh,
find out when that
well,
was.
I don't even remember who the keynote was. I always go by keynoters.
So everybody managed to get to the conference who wanted to come, but you
Mhm.
couldn't get out until, you could leave, but it was going to be hard to leave. You couldn't have left that
No, it
day.
wasn't. You could.
You could
There were a lot
have.
of people did leave
Oh.
that were concerned about family
So-
members and stuff. And of
Okay.
course, they didn't come back for years.
Yeah.
I don't think they actually blamed us, but it was like, because their mother was alone in Atlanta and lived in the house next door, and they were just freaked out. Of course, she was fine.
Mhm.
All the problem was up where we were.
Okay. All right. So, do you ever remember feeling uncomfortable at any conference? Was there anything that was going on that bothered you or made you wonder if you should be there?
Sometime, I'm sure there has been. I don't know that I recall them so well. I mean, I remember that there has been, but I don't dwell on things like that. So,
Okay.
but I remember occasionally feeling like there was some expectation, and I don't know how much I put on myself,
Mhm.
of feeling there was some expectation that I do something that I didn't want to do.
Mhm.
And then sometimes, how they suggest that you push, this would be a good place to push your boundaries. Well, I pushed my boundary and it's too far. It's like, okay, now I'm freaked out.
Yeah. Oh,
It wasn't a good boundary to push.
okay.
But I did it to myself, you know.
Okay.
I mean, I've had bad interactions with people there, but I'm a very strong, upfront person. There was a person that it was in the bunkhouse. I was in the top bunk. He was in the lower one, and he said I kept him awake all night snoring, you know. And he took his shoe and beat against the wall. Well, of course, I mean there were 6 other people in the thing.
Yeah.
And so I get up and I go, what is your problem? And he said, I'm not able to sleep. And I said, honey, I am not responsible for whether you get a good night's sleep or not. I said, if you have a problem, go sleep somewhere else.
Yeah.
So he did not take it well.
No.
But he was out of line, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to stop at question number 22,
Okay.
and we have 10 more.
Well, of course, I can talk forever.
Well, I'm glad you can. A lot of people don't remember much, but you have good memory. So we're going to stop and have lunch, and then we'll come back.
Okay.
Okay. Or
Bye.
we